when someone asks, what happens to people who never hear the gospel? That is a moral question, at least when it's raised by skeptics, like it often is. That is a moral question. Essentially what they're saying is, I don't think it's fair. I don't think God's being fair. That if the only way to be saved is through Jesus Christ, which it is, okay? The only way to be saved is through Jesus Christ, then I don't think it's fair that God is letting some people hear that message, and so they have a chance to be saved, and other people not hear that message, so they don't have a chance to be saved. At least that's the implication of the question. And so it's a moral question in that sense, that it's basically accusing God of being unfair, all right, in doing this. So in order to respond to that, I want to give you an illustration, all right, an analogy. And so I want you to imagine for a moment that you've got 20 people, all right, 20 people have committed some crime, and they've all gone to court before the judge, and they've all been found guilty, all right, and when they were found guilty, they were sentenced to pay some kind of a fine. But for those of you don't know, I'm a lawyer, and so I can tell you the way sometimes these fines work is the judge gives you what's called probation, which allows you to stay out of jail for right now, but there's kind of a jail sentence hanging over your head. And so they say, okay, as long as you do you fulfill these requirements that I'm going to place upon you, you don't have to go to jail. All right, but if you don't fulfill those requirements, then you're going to jail. That's why they have this time of this jail time kind of hanging over your head. And so one of those conditions will be payment of a fine. And so let's say that all these 20 people are in that boat where the judge says you have to pay this fine as a term of your probation, but if you don't pay the fine, you're going to jail. All right? Well, a gracious benefactor comes up and decides to pay the fine of two of those people. Just picks out two, no attachment to any of them, doesn't know any of them, not like just two family members or anything like that, just decides, I'm going to be gracious today, and I'm going to go pay these two defendants fines. Do the other 18 defendants have any moral ground to complain? Do they have a leg to stand on to come in and say, well, wait a minute, what about our fines? Why aren't you paying our fines? No, of course they don't. Why not? Because they're still getting what they deserve, all right? Justice is still being meted out to them. They still committed a crime. They still deserve punishment for that crime. That's what our whole criminal justice system is based on, right? The mere fact that these two other people, who, by the way, also deserve to be punished, that they're getting off for one reason or another without being punished, it doesn't somehow mean that you don't deserve to be punished yourself. Just because someone else gets away with something, so for example, doesn't mean that we shouldn't punish you and you should be able to get away with it. It doesn't work that way. And so why am I telling you all of this? Well, because this is what grace is all about. All right, grace, we always say we're saved by grace through faith, right? Grace means undeserved favor. It means someone is showing favor to you, but you don't deserve it. Those two people that I gave you the example, those two defendants who had their fines paid for them, they didn't deserve it. They didn't do anything to earn having their fines paid for them. They were no more or less deserving than the other 18. It's just that the benefactor chose to show grace and be gracious to those two. All right, well, was the benefactor under some kind of moral obligation to also be gracious to the other 18? No, of course not. The benefactor wasn't even under a moral obligation to be gracious to the first two. All right, so he didn't have any moral obligation, moral requirement to be gracious to anyone other than those two that he chose to. And so this objection that it's not fair of God to basically offer salvation to some people and not to others really is kind of backwards, looking at it backwards. It's assuming almost a works-based salvation. It's saying it's not fair, but the only way fairness even comes into it is if we've done something to deserve a particular outcome. If we've done something to deserve salvation, and then God only gives it to two people and not the other 18, well, then there's a problem. But we haven't done anything to deserve salvation. We all deserve condemnation. And so the mere fact that God may offer these two people salvation, even though they deserve condemnation, doesn't remove the fact that the other 18 still deserve condemnation. So there's nothing unfair about it.